All right, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so we got 6 people. You might want to say we'll just give it one more minute or so.
Okay.
And then we'll keep going. Oh, we didn't do it, but we didn't do it in the rehearsal, but we probably should do like a quick introduction of ourselves.
Okay.
All right, now we got 7 people. Lauren is one of them. All right, here they come.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Ullman with the City of Memphis. We're going to give it one more minute for folks to join the meeting, and then we'll get started. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. Thank you all for coming to this public meeting about High Point Terrace and the restriping project we have proposed. Before we get started, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Alex Ullman, and I'm the Bikeway and Pedestrian Program Coordinator with the City of Memphis, and this is my colleague, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to be here tonight. I am the manager of the city's Bikeway Pedestrian Program. And I'll be assisting Alex as needed throughout the evening. So back to you, Alex.
Okay. So just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded and the comments are being logged, and that's going to be put in a file that is going to be used to determine what the public input is for this project. So just want to make sure everyone is aware that they know they're being recorded right now. So as we move on to what this project is, the genesis of this meeting is based on a request we received from the High Point Terrace CDC. The request we received was to determine traffic calming measures that could be implemented on High Point Terrace and a possible reduction in the speed limit. In response, we have created some proposals for the High Point neighborhood to review and provide feedback on before city engineering makes the final decision on the lane markings for High Point Terrace. Our proposals utilize lane narrowing to calm traffic and increase safety by reducing speed. With the extra space created by lane reductions, there's room for bike lanes, a dedicated space for people riding a bike, which add to traffic calming measures. Additionally, we were asked to do a speed study to determine if the current speed was appropriate, but this process is not a part of public input as determined by the data collected on the street. So to review, what is included in this project is the restriping the current lane markings. What's not included are sidewalks, resurfacing of the street, speed humps or bumps, landscaping, and street lights. And if Nick, if you could talk about the results of this speed study.
Absolutely, and maybe first, just a quick housekeeping note. You may have noticed that you are muted for right now. So as we go through the presentation, we're just going to keep participants muted just to ensure that we can get through the presentation without any interruptions or have some background noise. A lot of you are probably at home, so just to cut down some background noise and feedback and all of that. But we do have a Q&A portion of the meeting after the presentation. So once we get to that point, we of course want to hear from you. We'll go over a little more direction once we get to that point and how that's going to work. But just for now, know that you certainly will have the opportunity to speak up once we get there. And at any point during the presentation, if you do want to go ahead and put a question in the queue for us to get to when we get there, feel free to go ahead and type it in the chat box or share any comments in the chat box. You're certainly welcome to do that as well. All right, so yes, Alex, thanks. You asked me to talk about the results of the speed study. So as Alex mentioned, part of the request was that we do a speed study to determine existing data conditions around vehicles traveling up and down the street and whether a reduction in speed limits would be warranted or if the current posted speed limit is justified for what we're seeing out. So we conducted the study. Based on the results of the study, we would tend to agree that there is an issue with speeding along the streets. There were outliers clocked as high as 60 to 70 miles per hour moving along the street. As all of you well know, the posted speed limit is 35 miles per hour. The 85th percentile or 85% of all vehicles moving along the street were measured at 39 miles per hour or lower. The average speed, we don't have it on the slide here, but the average speed, 50%, was actually right around that 35. So in other words, 50%, a half of all vehicles moving on the street are going over the speed limit. So based on the results of the study, the city traffic engineer is recommending a reduction in the posted speed limit from 35 to 30 miles per hour. Regarding speed humps, because this is often the question that we get pretty commonly when people want to talk to us about calming traffic, slowing down traffic on their street. A lot of people immediately ask, what about speed humps? Can we get speed humps? In order to qualify for a speed hump or speed humps, streets have to meet very specific criteria. They look at different conditions. So in the case of High Point Terrace, that is something that has been looked at in the past. There have been previous requests submitted to do speed humps on High Point Terrace, and they have been denied due to those criteria not being met. So specifically the width of the street is too wide to receive speed humps, as well as traffic volume being a little higher than we would normally do for speed humps. So because of that, speed humps are not an option that's on the table for High Point. However, there are other traffic calming options that we can look at, particularly by adding some additional markings to narrow the lanes. And that's something that Alex is going to be showing you. That's really what the meat of the proposal is. And we know from experience in doing this in other parts of the city that generally when we narrow lanes in this fashion, it can reduce average speeds by about 5 miles per hour along the street. So that's that, and I'll turn it back to Alex.
Thanks, Nick. So now we're going to show you some illustrative cross sections to talk about the changes that are proposed on High Point Terrace. Please keep in mind that these are not to scale. They're just drawings to show a concept of what we're proposing. We have 2 proposals for one section of High Point, and a decision has not been made about which direction we are going. And that is really the purpose of this meeting, is to collect your feedback on that. So with that, I'm just going to show you what High Point currently looks like from Walnut Grove to Sam Cooper along the street. And so as you can see, and as you know by driving in the neighborhood, that these are very wide lanes, roughly 22 feet going either direction. Our standard lane width for the city of Memphis is 10 feet. And we know that a wider lane induces speed or encourages people to speed, and that narrow lanes calm traffic and therefore increase safety. If you can imagine the section of Poplar Avenue by Clark Tower where the lane narrows, you also tend to slow down in that area because of the design of the road. And so, you know, we know that slower speeds, calmer traffic means a safer street. And so that's why we're proposing these changes. And currently, on-street parking is allowed on High Point Terrace because the lanes are so wide. So for proposal A, we are proposing to take away the current on-street parking and add to decrease the width of the lane and add bike lanes with a buffer, a painted buffer. So there's a number of reasons for that, but the main reason is, again, to narrow the lane, to decrease speed and make it a calmer street for the neighborhood and people driving and walking and biking. And I'd also make a note that you can apply for a special parking permit for specific occasions. Say if you had a party, or you know, around the holidays, if you had more people coming in and wanted to park on the street, there is a process for getting a special parking permit if you wanted to utilize the street for parking, even with this proposal, if it comes to fruition. Proposal B is much more similar to how the street currently functions, but we would add, again, narrow the lanes and add parking markings and also a bike lane, which would again narrow the lane and therefore decrease speeds and increase safety. As we move along the street northward, this is what it currently looks like in front of the High Point Shopping Center. And this is what we are proposing. This would go for either proposal. This is for proposal A or B. This is what we're thinking in terms of what's going to be in front of the High Point Shopping Center. And as we continue down the street, this is what it looks like once you go over the Sam Cooper overpass. This is a narrow section of High Point Terrace. And what we're looking for here is to not change the current configuration of what is currently allowed. You can currently park on either side of the street, but there is not enough room for a bike lane. So we are proposing to add a shared lane marking to indicate that it's acceptable and good for both a bike and a car to be using that lane. That just increases safety by increasing the awareness that bikes are also supposed to be in that space. So with that, we can move on to the remainder of our meeting tonight, which is going to be a question and answer section. So if you do have a question, we would love to hear them, and you can either raise your hand, and we will get to folks in the order that we see their hand raised, or you can type your name in the chat box, and we'll again call on folks as their name appears in order. But I'd also remind you that tonight is not the last opportunity you have for input. You can always fill out the survey that was included in the letter to folks that live along High Point, and it's also available on the city's engineering website. And you can also submit comments to me via email. And our public input period closes Friday, October 8th. So if you could get all your comments to me into me by that point, that would be ideal. And Nick, am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it well. Again, I guess just to reiterate, so we do have multiple means of input. This meeting is not the only one. There is the online survey. You have the address on here. Alternatively, if you just Google City of Memphis engineering surveys, you can get to the same page. Or of course, emailing Alex with any comments as well. So all of these different formats are provided, and they're all equal. No matter how you provide any input, they'll all be weighted the same. Yeah, and so again, as Alex said, we're just going to try and go through this question by question or comment by comment. So again, just try and prevent people from talking over one another. We know it's a little awkward sometimes with these virtual meetings. I'm sure we've all had experience with it the past year and a half. So try to keep it organized. Again, just use the raise your hand function in Microsoft Teams. If you're at your computer, you should see that the button with a little smiley face and the hand being raised. So you can just click that, or alternatively, just type your name or your question into the chat box, and we can call on you that way as well. And when we call on you, just at that point, feel free to unmute yourself and share your comments, questions, and so on. And again, just a reminder, this is being recorded, and everything, all the input that we're receiving will be noted. So with that, I believe I saw the first hand raised was from Lauren Giovannetti. So
thank
Lauren,
you.
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much to Nick and Alex for taking time to try to make our neighborhood safer. This all looks really great, and I do appreciate having options out here for us to consider. My question is, which option do you think is the safest for pedestrians and bikers in our neighborhood?
I think, Nick, you can take that question.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the question, Lauren. I think from a, well, personally, I would say proposal A would be the safest, and a couple reasons why. From the standpoint of a person who is riding a bike, that proposal provides that, I think it's 4 to 5 foot wide painted buffer. So that is providing more physical separation, more physical distance between moving vehicles and anybody who's using the bike lane. So from that standpoint, it's clearly a little more comfortable feeling and safer. But there's also advantage there for pedestrians. We know that when you do have curbside parking, that could reduce visibility of pedestrians on the sidewalk. For example, if you're in a car and you're turning into a driveway or a side street, you might have your view of the pedestrian blocked in that exact moment, so you might miss them. Or vice versa, a pedestrian who's trying to cross the street or cross a side street, they might have their visibility impaired as well because of the parallel parking there. That said, we do know from observation that there is relatively low parking on the street today. It does happen, but it's not as if you're in the middle of downtown or anything. And again, all that said, I think both options still deliver would deliver an improvement in traffic calming, help slow down traffic, and just provide benefits for everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I saw I don't see other, I do see a hand raised, Sean Davis. We'll get to you in a second. But before that hand went up, I saw a question in the chat box come along from Ron Abernathy. His comment is, Riverside and South Front have speed humps. Why does High Point Terrace not meet the same criteria? It's a good question, and I can understand why there'd be some, why you'd be having the question. What are on Riverside and South Front are actually not speed humps. Those are speed bumps. I know they may seem to be the same thing, but there is some slight difference there. These speed bumps that have been going up in certain locations of the city, such as Riverside and South Front, are temporary, and they're being put there through special requests from MPD to cut down on drag racing, trick riding, people doing donuts, that sort of thing. So they are not permanent, and they will be removed at a later date in the future. So these are meant to be going in again, temporary nature and only by special request from MPD. They are not part of our standard speed hump program. And that, yeah, again, puts down permanent options. So that's not something that we approve through engineering. If you were interested in something like that, I would recommend you start with MPD. And if MPD agrees with that being kind of an emergency or urgent need for those speed bumps, then they would notify us in engineering. So I guess, let's see, the next hand I saw raised, Alex, was, like I said, Sean Davies? Apologies. Davis, sorry about that. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for your time, by the way, and I'm excited to be at the meeting and excited about bike lanes potentially coming to the neighborhood. I'm trying to get the viewpoint of someone who bikes and drives to the neighborhood. I've lived here for the past 7 years now, and remember the first day I moved in, there was like a high-speed incident right in front of High Point Terrace, where High Point Grocery, where two cars were doing 80 miles an hour and almost like hit a bunch of people and all that stuff. So ever since that first day, it's been kind of on my radar, for traffic slowing for sure. And we get cut throughs, other places too. But as far as, I bike at least twice a day down High Point Terrace, except, for when it's snowing or a blizzard or something like that. So I feel like I can give a viewpoint, kind of like as somebody who bikes and drives. I think Plan B is probably the most feasible and easy to implement as far as a compromise between, people who bike and people who live on the street. So I don't think that street parking being taken away is going to be very popular, but having the bike lane, on the driver's side of the car, that's closer to the people who are driving. So that does slow down traffic just by itself, just having the bike lane there. So I'm all for that. And I don't feel that unsafe biking down High Point in the street right now, but I am over 20 years experience in this area. So yeah, so that was my basically my input. It's like I was kind of for Plan B, is then I think it's a good compromise between the people who live there and the people who bike. And also, just to note, I think the bike lanes change, you said, over by High Point Grocery. Just one issue, this may not apply, but a lot of times people park there on the green line, on the street on the green line. If that could somehow be like blocked off, because a lot of times when I'm coming out, from the green line, if there's a car there, I can't see to the right or left. So I think a lot of people, park there and just, for exercise or whatever.
Yeah.
That's just an aside. But
yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. So you're talking about like the actual crosswalk at the green line being
yeah. That actually does help a little bit. I mean, I think more people stop there than not, although they don't have to stop technically if there's no bikes coming. So I think that's a good thing. But yeah, right there where the green line is it can be a visibility issue, especially on weekends, because you can't really see in the street sometimes. So I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, I'm available for any other comments later too if you need me to.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. Appreciate the comments. Your comments have been noted. That's what this is all about. So thank you for sharing that. I believe the next hand up was from Lisa Rutch.
Hey, it's actually Bobby, Lisa's husband. Hey, Alex.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I had two questions. One question is, I noticed that the suggestion from the city was 30 miles an hour on the speed limit, but it also said that 5 miles an hour, they're having bike lanes would be like a 5 mile an hour adjustment. So is that taken into account in terms of dropping the speed limit? Is that having the bike lanes not enough for that adjustment, or does that make sense?
It does, yes. And the answer is that we really see the two happening in conjunction with one another. They kind of support or reinforce one another. So on one hand, you have the addition of the stripings, the narrowing of the lane like that provides a little physical reinforcement towards driving slower, or I guess, reinforcement through design of driving slower. And then on the other hand, you have the posted speed limit change that provides that reinforcement through regulation, through legal kind of means. So yes, they kind of work hand in hand.
Gotcha. Thank you. My second question was the speed studies. I know there was a traffic study done in 2019, and the average speed was like, my understanding is it was like 4 miles an hour or less than this one. Is there any, are those speed traffic studies, is that public information to see, or just out of curiosity? I mean, I've found it interesting and fascinating that there were people driving that fast. I have seen it once on High Point. We've lived here 25 years, and I know it, I'm sure it happens, and I just don't see it. But is there, are the speed studies, traffic studies, is that in documentation we can see, just to see kind of numbers and frequency and time of day and that kind of stuff, or is it shareable?
Yeah, just please email Alex with that request, and
Okay.
we'll get back to you. The study itself is really just a large spreadsheet with a whole bunch of numbers on there. So
yeah,
not really something
cool.
that's fun to look at, but yeah, if you put in your request, we can find a way to share information with you.
Cool. And could I see the one from, would it be possible to also get a copy of the one from 2019? Just out of curiosity, I'm just curious about the difference. That's a pretty significant difference in speeds, and I just wonder, are there policemen having to drive fast down High Point for something, or is there a certain time? Anyway, I just kind of wanted to compare the two time periods. So
Sure. Yeah, please just put that in your email request to Alex, and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. I believe the next person in line is Natalie Snead.
Hi. I have not, I'll allow my camera. I'm here with my son. I have not done this before, and I know this says Q&A. I just kind of wanted to comment more so. I agree that it sounds like a good compromise to keep the parking along High Point. However, I've ridden my bike, and my husband rides his bike a lot down High Point Terrace, and we do also have cycling experience. But as far as my son ever riding in that lane that wouldn't have a buffer, I feel like I wouldn't want him to learn how to ride his bike at all down High Point Terrace without, like, if the car's just right there to the side. I feel like you would have to have a considerable amount of experience before trying that. So since this is such a family neighborhood with a lot of kids, I just feel like that could be something to consider, even though it is a trade-off with the parking. I feel like for the general future of our neighborhood and the future of the kids in the neighborhood, I feel like that's something to think about. That's all.
Yeah, no, thank you for the comment, ma'am. I think it is fair to say that the option with the buffer would be more comfortable and yeah, just more comfortable for people of different skill level, different ages in riding a bike, like you're saying. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Next in line, I believe, is Cameron Myatt.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry about that. All right.
We can definitely hear you.
All right. Yeah. All right. So I live on High Point. Terrace. All for support and appreciate the work you're doing here. All for support of the bike lane, but I would definitely not want to lose the parking on the street. I've got a single car driveway. It would make it very tough. If I were to ever have a family or anything like that with two cars needing to park in that driveway regularly. So just wanted to voice that all for the bike lane. I do bike. Usually go up to the green line and get on the green line from there, but wouldn't want to lose parking out in front of my house.
I understand. Okay. All right. Well, again, that's what all this is about, is collecting that kind of input. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. So with that, I believe next in line here is Cole Giovannetti.
Hey guys, thank you. Is there a way to, I think I've seen potentially in Midtown somewhere where the bike lane is actually in between the cars and the sidewalk? Is that something that you or for us?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So yeah, so what you're referring to is basically the bike lane and the parking lane would reverse so that the bike lane is next to the curb, and then the parking lane acts as a buffer, if you will, between the bike lane and the car lane, travel lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that is something that can be done on some streets. The problem with High Point Terrace is that it's really a little too narrow for that. Generally, when we do that kind of configuration, there has to be enough space to do a minimum 2-foot wide buffer between the bike lane and the parking lane. That's so that when somebody on the passenger side of the car opens their door isn't into the middle of the bike lane. And that could, be a pretty serious safety issue if you're riding your bike down the bike lane. Somebody opens the door, they don't turn around to see somebody coming on the bike. They open the door, and that's just, you're gonna crash into the door. So we need to have space to do that minimum 2-foot buffer, preferably 3 feet between the parking lane and the bike lane. Unfortunately, we don't have that much room to work with on High Point Terrace. So that would be a fairly serious safety concern from our perspective, is if you tried to do that, that buffer wouldn't be there, and you could have that exact scenario happen where somebody's trying to use the bike lane, ride down it, and door opens up. Yeah, it wouldn't be a good outcome there. So that's why that's not an option that we were proposing.
And so I mean, I obviously trust you. I'm not an engineer, but it's the same. You have to drive a car, right? And so if you're in a bike lane that is on the driver's side of the car, there's a guarantee that that person is at the same risk as the passenger, and the space is the same, right? Like if the bike lane's on the inside, the lane is still the same, right? The same size, no matter. So
yeah, no, you're right, and that's a fair point. The key difference, though, is that when the bike lane is to the inside, the driver's side of the parked car, in that scenario, if somebody does open their door and he doesn't look behind them, the person on the bike does have the ability to swerve into the adjacent travel lane and get out of the way. Whereas if they're next to the curb, there's nowhere to swerve to, or they're hit. Either they crash into the car door, or they hit that curb, and they'll probably still fall off the bike. So
I gotcha. So is there a way to? And I don't know this. I feel like the western side of the street takes on more of the parking, and maybe because those lots are smaller than the eastern side. Is there a way to do like no parking on the eastern side, and do double bike lanes over there as opposed to, and then leave the right side the same, or is that not? My concern is that obviously I prefer option A, but I recognize that I don't live on High Point. There, I guess, needs to be compromise, but or at least thought given to the parking. But you know, people do drive fast down that street, and even if they're driving the speed limit, I mean, 30 miles an hour in a car when you're looking down at changing the music or texting, I mean, it's just a dangerous. I mean, biking is obviously just dangerous on streets. So we need just if there was a way to have that to be away from the cars as much as possible, I feel like that would be the better option.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. To your question, I wouldn't say that's an impossible configuration. What you're proposing. We wouldn't want to put like a northbound and a southbound bike lane on the same side of the street. I think if that was a route we wanted to investigate, we would still have, you know, your northbound bike lane on the east side of the street, your southbound bike lane on the west side of the street, but then only have parking on one side of the street. So if you eliminate parking on one side of the street, that does provide us with about 7 feet of additional space to figure out how to use, and then we could divvy that up into those buffers that would be needed for that. So that would be something that could be investigated. Obviously, then the question that would, you know, typically comes up is, well, what side of the street gets parking and what side doesn't? And it can be difficult for you know, people along the street to come to an agreement on which side gets it and which not. Something that in that scenario that's often done is maybe every block it kind of alternates. So maybe one block you have, you know, parking on the east side, next block on the west side, trying to keep the distribution fairer, if you will, alternating back and forth. So that, you know, that could be a possibility. I think we would need to hear from residents strongly that that's something they would like us to investigate.
Yeah. Okay. And then last question, what is is this a vote, or how does it get, who determines what is going to play out? And I'm going to go back.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that question. I wouldn't say it's a vote in the sense that, you know, we're tallying up all the numbers and, you know, whatever, if it comes down to one vote difference or something, well, there it is. That's what we go with. It's not really like that. But it is all about just getting the input of residents and seeing where the general consensus lies with residents, along with listening to the data, what the data tells us. So again, that speed study that we did, the results, the data there does show us that there is a need to calm traffic in some way. So, but yes, we also want to hear from residents, get their inputs, and really try to understand what the consensus is. So obviously, the more that we hear from people, no matter what side, what position they have, the more we hear, the better.
Yep. And so I think Ron, I don't think he's still in the meeting, but he had a very similar question just about like the bike lanes and where you could put parking and things like that, which I believe you answered. So I think that's covered.
Yeah, I see Lauren, you have your hand raised again. I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, so yeah, well, let you speak again. Have the floor again.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to kind of echo, you know, what some of the other people had said. You know, I have a 8-year-old and I don't feel safe with him riding his bike right now on High Point Terrace. And I do think that children would benefit from that buffer that we talked about. But I do think almost everyone who lives in High Point Terrace has a single driveway, and we all know that pain of parking on the street. So, just kind of understanding everybody's comments. And then piggybacking, I was actually going to ask what Cole asked about the having the bike lane be, having the parking be a buffer between the traffic and the bike lane. And so I think maybe it would be nice to investigate the option of parking on one side of the street, because if my memory serves me right, most of the street parking is on the west side of High Point Terrace, because on the east side, most of the houses actually face the little feeder streets. There's fewer homes that actually face High Point Terrace on the east side of the street. And I don't want to say this with absolute certainty, but I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of homes on High Point Terrace are on the west, that actually their driveways are on High Point Terrace are on the west side of the street. So it might be possible to do what you're suggesting with parking on one side, because I think the need really is mostly on one side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And from my recollection of, visiting the street and moving down it multiple times, I think that is mostly accurate, that the houses that do actually front the streets are mostly on the west side. So yeah, and then obviously we have, of course, the shopping center, wanting to accommodate parking for them as well. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing that, and certainly we'll consider it. Don't see any further hands raised or comments in the chat. So, anyone else we haven't heard from yet?
Are we able to have a discussion? Because I would love to hear what the gentleman would think, the one who was saying he wanted to retain his on-street parking, about one side versus the other, if that's something that would be attractive or not.
Sure, I think as long as everyone who at least had a question of their own has had the opportunity to ask it. We've heard from everybody who wants to speak up, and I think we have. So I'm okay with that, as long as, again, we just try to be mindful of muting ourselves and not talk over one another as best we can. Does that sound good, Alex?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. My name's Cameron Myatt, by the way. I think that's completely fair. I'm very much open to one side of the street. I just would like to be able to park near my house, or somebody, again, had a family and wanted to be able to use some street parking. I'm on that west side of the street, and I think that's a fair assessment that most driveways that are on High Point are on the west side. But even if it was parking across the street, I think that's a compromise that I would be open to.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's great. Would you be willing to, I mean, you can do it now if you're comfortable doing so, but at least in an email to Alex, share your street address. That way we can just be absolutely certain that we're taking a close look at that exact location where you live.
Sure. Yeah, I think I added it in my initial request for the link, but yeah, I can shoot it to him again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot that we did it on the front end. So if that's the case, then disregard that. Great. Anyone else at this point? I'll just open it up. Anyone else we haven't heard from wants to speak up or have a question? Oh, Sean Davis again. Thank you.
Hey y'all. Sorry. Is there any data that shows if bike lanes are on one side or the other? Does the northbound lane, do people speed more on that if there's no bike lane there as opposed to the other lane? And then I know having the bike lanes on one side, as a biker, you're more exposed to traffic. You have to cross the street more if you're depending on where you're going. So I was just wondering what the data was for that, for if there's a bike lane versus if one side of the street, I guess, goes faster than the other.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. So again, we would not consider putting the bike lanes on the same side of the street. We would keep them separated, southbound on the west side, northbound on the east side, just like a conventional setup. There are locations you may be familiar with in the city, or maybe other cities around the country, where you have like a two-way bike path on one side of the street, basically both bike lanes together like that. That really is a configuration that we prefer not to do. Whenever you install that configuration, it creates a bunch of other challenges and safety issues to address. Particularly at intersections. Drivers may not realize they need to look both directions at that crossing of the bike lanes. So they may not even be aware that somebody on a bike could be coming from the other direction. That's the main one. So you really have to put special care to how you're designing the intersection crossings, and to a lesser extent, driveway crossings as well. So generally you would see a configuration like that, maybe along a long stretch of roadway where there are no intersecting streets or driveways on that side of the street. Makes it a little safer. So in this case, for High Point Terrace, that really isn't an option that I would want to pursue. But again, the idea of maybe just having parking on one side of the street, that would free up the space that could be needed. Kind of do like the buffered bike lane like we were talking about. It would still keep the bike lanes on one, divide them between two sides of the street.
Yeah. The buffered I think is probably the safest, but it's not always feasible. But yeah, that's great. And speed limit thing is great too, because just a 5 mile an hour reduction that can be the difference between a fatality and the injury. So
sure, absolutely.
Those are my comments.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, speed. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, just to piggyback on that. Yeah, speed is the greatest determinant in the severity of a crash. So the more that we can get people to drive slower, and even if there is a crash, it will most likely be less severe because they're driving a little slower. Natalie Snead, see you raise your hand again.
Yeah, you had said if you had enough, interest, that's an option you could look into, is the parking on one side of the street. I really like that could be a compromise that also provides adequate safety for a less experienced biker to be on the road. So just wanted to put my input in there that hopefully we can look into that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I would suggest, for anyone who's interested in advocating for that, if you've already taken that online survey, maybe just send us a supplemental email stating, hey, this is an option I would also like you to investigate. If you haven't done the online survey yet, your comments tonight obviously are being recorded, but if you know somebody else who hasn't done the survey yet, you can ask them to type that into the comment box, and we can pursue it that way. I will say that since that is one of the options that we have not initially presented, that wasn't on the letter that went out to residents, that wasn't on the survey, we would possibly have to kind of do this again, send out the letter again with, okay, here's the latest proposal, give us your feedback on this one. May have to do another meeting like this one. But hey, if that leads to a great compromise that fulfills everybody's desires for the street, then it's all worth it. Lauren?
Yeah, I think, taking our time and getting it right, I think, would be okay. Obviously, we're wanting speed issues solved on our streets as soon as possible, but in order to get a compromise that everyone really loves, I think it would be worth to, even if we have to redo it a little bit, redo some of this process, Because I do really love this idea of having street parking and the buffered spots. I think that would be awesome. And I hadn't taken the survey yet, so I'll make sure that I go ahead and say that. And I did have one question I forgot to ask. When I sent the letter in about the speed limit, it was because I had read or I had heard, Alex, I think, or Nick, it was maybe you said in one of our meetings about the default speed limit being lowered to 25. And so I was just wondering why the recommendation was 30 instead of 25 for High Point Terrace for the reduced speed limit.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, solely because of the data, the results of the speed study. We look at generally what like the 50th percentile is, the 85th percentile is, and that leads us to our determination. So in this case, the data does not support a lower speed limit. That's not to say that, 5 years from now, or maybe not even 5 years now, 2 years from now, we could do another speed study and the result might be different at that time. But in terms of setting a speed limit, it is a data-driven process. So in this case, the data did support a reduction down to 30, but not to 25. And just to be clear, 25 miles per hour is the new default speed limit in the city of Memphis. So any street that does not have a posted speed limit, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. So like all other streets in the neighborhood with no posted speed limit would be 25 miles per hour. But High Point does have a posted limit that's different.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we have Lisa who has her hand raised.
Yeah, hey, this is Bobby again. So the two questions. One is on the default. I had wax in my ears. I didn't catch that. You're saying the default was 25 for, that was the city established that for residential streets in general, or is that based on width of street or, sorry, I kind of missed that.
Sure, yeah. Any street in the city of Memphis that does not have a posted speed limit, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. So generally that means local, like neighborhood streets, residential streets, but there certainly are some other streets in the city that we could go to, in downtown, just all around the city, that if there is no posted speed limit, then the default speed is 25 miles per hour.
Gotcha.
And yeah, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
That's great. No, that's very helpful. Thanks. The other thing is I thought the parking on the west side was interesting. Cole's idea was an interesting idea. My wife and I are talking about that north of the Green Line, there are houses facing, I think there are some houses facing High Point that aren't on corners on the east side. So then I don't know if they park on the street or not. I know they do down by the grocery, but it may not be. It's definitely, I'm definitely agreeing that on the west side, south of the Green Line, because of there not being a cut through street where Aurora is. So there's definitely houses facing High Point that would want to park there. So that sounded like a pretty neat idea to me. However, I do wonder about the, it'd be interesting to see how many houses or where people park north of the Green Line that park on the street. Because that may be a little bit different layout there. Or perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Like we would not, again, if this is an option that we're going to investigate, we're going to do it properly. We're going to notify people that this is being proposed. We're not going to just, surprise people one day. Oh, there's no more parking on the east side of the street.
Right.
So
yeah,
we would be notifying people again, and again, kind of doing this again. But again, that's the process. That's why we're doing this. It's to hear from residents, hear ideas, hear concerns, and ideally, it leads to a better outcome.
And do you know if based on I think y'all sent out actual paper documentation or letter maybe to the people that lived on High Point or touched High Point. Do you know how many people responded on that, or how many responded out of those particular people that are directly impacted?
Yeah, Alex, would you like to answer that?
Well, I know we have 62 people that have completed the online survey. So, and I've received a handful of other emails about it. So, plus the people that are involved in this meeting, I know there's probably some overlap there, but you know, I think we sent out maybe like over 100 letters. So, you know, whatever that rough math is how much feedback we've gotten at this point, which is, you know, I mean, I'm not an expert at this point, but Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. That feels like a good amount of feedback for this type of project.
That definitely is. Yeah, I would say that's a higher participation rate or response rate than normal.
Great. Thanks for answering the questions. Thanks for y'all's time. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Cole has his hand
Hey,
raised.
one thing.
Yep.
Yeah. In response to him, I think to Bobby's question on the north side, or I guess statement, I think that people definitely park because you have the parking for the shopping center on the west side of High Point Terrace, and that they obviously fill up like pretty quick and many times a day. And everybody uses that other side, which you clearly don't want to take away parking. But I think you guys, didn't you already have a different layout for the north side anyway?
Well,
on your presentation.
I mean, we can
on
go
the
back.
North side.
So if we're talking about, so this is like north of the Sam Cooper overpass. So I don't know if that's what everyone's referring to, but and then in front of the shopping center, we're also proposing to keep the parking, you know, on that east side, where I know people typically park. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you did say something about have it being the signs in the street rather than a bike lane, maybe. Yeah, I see that there's parking now. Yeah.
I think you're talking. So Alex was talking about the section of High Point from Summer to Sam Cooper, so north of Sam Cooper, and up there, the street is narrower from curb to curb, so there's less room to work with.
I got you.
Okay.
I see. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I see some hands raised again. Cameron?
Real quick, I just thought about it because I saw one drive by. The golf carts, was that taken into account in any of this? I see about 5 times as many golf carts go by than I do bikes out of my front window. I guess can you use the bike lane?
Sure. I think that's kind of a gray area. Technically, those golf carts are not street legal vehicles and should not be operating on a public street like that. And also because they are a motor vehicle, they also should not be operating in a bike lane. That's all the theory of it. Now, at the end of the day, I think we know that MPD is not really enforcing some of those things. We're seeing more and more golf carts like that around the city. So I wouldn't say it's something that we are really taking into account. Again, like they're not supposed to be there, so we can't really, we shouldn't be designing for it. But all that said, they could, they would be able to use the bike lane and that it's there. They could be in that space, and maybe separating them from car traffic, would be a good thing. But to be clear, technically that would be illegal for a motor vehicle to be using the bike lane in that manner.
I figured there's a lot in the neighborhood, so.
Sure. Yeah. That's, like I said, it's not the only neighborhood where we're seeing an uptick in golf carts. There's some other places around the city as well. The green line, just to add, the green line itself is also, motor vehicles are also prohibited on the green line itself. So technically, any golf carts operating on the green line are also doing that illegally. Well, I see it is now 6:31. I believe we were scheduled to end at 6:30. Is that right, Alex?
Yep.
Any last minute comments or questions that we haven't gotten to? Wasn't sure if we had a phone number unmuted themselves. Don't see a name. 901-239-4583. Did you have a comment or question?
I do not. Sorry, I was just listening. I appreciate you asking.
Okay, yeah, just making sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Alex, you want to close it up?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for their feedback and participating in the meeting today. I think it was really productive and just shows that you care about what's going on in your street, and we really appreciate that to make sure that this project is the best that it can be. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for their time and wish you a good rest of your Monday.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.